called Refuse to be Denied because that's the name of a song which I discuss in the book from a thrash metal band called Anthrax in America, which my dad's a huge metal fan. And when I was a kid, when I was 16, I used to train in my gym, you know, every night in the garage or go running, and that was the song which I listened to. At the time, because I looked when I sat down on the bench, I looked up at the screen, and they always show it from the worst angle, and it did look quite bad. It didn't feel bad. I thought I won a good jackal, and I thought I was going to get a good penalty for that. How I was so wrong. But in hindsight, you know, I looked by the letter of the law. I was like, all right, it is a red. Technically, it's a red. And the analyst showed me the day after Alan Rowland refereeing a Heineken Cup game, and somebody did pretty much something exactly the same. And even though different refs had dealt with it differently, Alan Rowland went straight up to him and pointed a red. So I knew it wasn't a personal attack or anything, trying him to set his stall out or whatever. But in hindsight, now I saw Alan Rowland in the championship, I think it was, or something, and somebody did a tip tackle and he told him to play on. And then that's when I did think, like, oh, hang on, like there's not consistency in that. So if everybody was given a red card for it, then I'd feel fine, you know. Then, well, I wouldn't feel fine, but I could accept it. But when tip tackles are going against you and you see them and nothing happens, then it does bring up the whole what if thing, which I think, not because it was me, if it was any other player who got sent off, I think we would have got through to the final. And then
and to sit there for 60 minutes and have to just watch from the sideline must have been.
Well, that's what, when we went to the hearing afterwards, they wanted me to play in the third place playoff. My argument was, you know, they said it was a bit harsh. They didn't take into account that as a 7, I haven't even been given a yellow card before until that point at professional level. And they said, you know, it wasn't already enough of a punishment, basically being sent off after 20 minutes, having to watch it for 60, and basically not reaching the final because of that decision. To try and make me get back to the third place playoff, but they weren't. They chopped the ban down from 6 to 3 weeks because I showed remorse apparently in the interview and the sort of hearing afterwards. But yeah, I do sort of feel a bit hard done by, to be honest. But by the law goes, I still agree. Yeah. It was a red. If a mother was watching that and saw people getting ended up on their heads, then she wouldn't want their son to play rugby at the end of the day. But everybody would have to be treated the same way, which I do agree. There's not much consistency at the moment. I actually, you know, I picked rugby because I like the physical contact. So I went to play football. Initially, my first sport was football, and I played for a club called Lisvane, who had an impeccable record by the time I turned up, and I was about 15 years old. I played centre mid. Like to think of myself as like a Roy Keane type player, and by the end of the season I had 2 reds and 3 yellows, and they didn't have 1 yellow card in about 4 seasons. So I sort of realised to me that I just sort of love taking players down. I love the physical side of it. By the time I was 21, I'd already had a knee operation, shoulder and jaw operation. I've had torn hamstrings, dislocated fingers, as you might recently know, all sorts of things, you know. And but the worst one I had was I was weight training and I dropped a dumbbell on my finger and my nail came clean off, and they had to strap it up with dressing. 2 days later I had to take it off, and you got a nerve bed under your nail, which some of you might know if into your anatomy, and they had to sort of take the dressing off. It took 45 minutes to take it off because it was so painful, it was excruciating, and in the end I had to put my hand on the counter and the nurse just had to sort of peel it off, and it was the most horrific pain I ever had. So out of all those injuries, without trying to sound heroic, I'd take a dislocated shoulder over a lost nail any day. The best player I played with, there's a couple of them really. I think Gethin Jenkins for one, as a prop, the things he can get up to was unbelievable. He'd take his top off and he looked like he picked him straight out of a pub from a darts alley. He was in terrible shape, but he was super strong, and with fitness tests they wouldn't put him in with the front row forwards, they put him in with the back rowers because he was that fit. And you know, himself in the loose, he gets up to so much good work. Admittedly, he's not the best scrummager, but in the loose he's brilliant. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely have to be Shane Williams, because I turned up to Welsh training, and they're these young whiz sort of wingers who've just come into the academy. They've apparently got the quickest 40-metre times in the system, and Shane would get a ball and he'd make them fall on their backside. Like he was 34, 35, and he was still running circles around the young athletes. And because he had sort of physical attributes, he was only small, but his footwork was it was a sort of thing you couldn't really coach. It was just sort of innate, and the skill level he used to show in training and in matches. Wales were definitely a different team without him, and we've sort of adopted our tactics now with George North and Alex Cuthbert, because they're so tall you can go to the air a bit more, use them sort of more direct ball carriers, but as an individual for just out and out skill, Shane Williams was astonishing really. I think David Pocock is the most difficult to play against. Richie McCaw and Pocock are both pretty similar. McCaw's a bit more of a nuisance as a 7, so he's a bit more of a pain in the backside by pulling jerseys, keeping you on the floor, cheating really. being an All Black, world-class cheaters, the All Blacks. But then the most difficult over the ball, because he competes over the ball, which is what I got on mark, was David Pocock, I think. So those two are equally as difficult to play against, but for slightly different reasons. Well, Francois Pienaar stands out because he was my position. He won a World Cup in, I think it was '95. And I actually met him at the end of the World Cup. We had an IRB dinner, and I had to go to represent Wales, and I saw him, and he didn't even introduce himself. He just went straight into the red and said how ridiculous it was. And I was talking to him, and I was thinking, flip next Francois Pienaar, and he hadn't even introduced himself. And I sort of assumed that we got on because you're in the sort of rugby world together. That was quite surreal chatting to him, and it was nice to meet him. But growing up, my hero was Lennox Lewis, actually. So I always wanted to be 6'5" and 18 stone, because I watched a bit of wrestling as well. And whenever I ate my food, apparently my dad said when I was from 6 to 10, almost every meal I'd say, would Lennox Lewis eat this? Because I wanted to grow up and be big as him. So Lennox Lewis was my first hero, but from a rugby point of view, it would definitely be Martin Williams. When I was about 17, 18, when I turned professional, well, I was about 18, I was coming home at 2 o'clock in the afternoons. Our coach keeps us until 5 now, so it's a lot more difficult than it was back then. So I was coming home at 2, and I thought, I had a couple of something in the bank, and I thought, right, I can either buy myself a PlayStation 3 or a drum kit to be slightly more productive. So I asked my mum and dad, and I ended up going for the drum kit, which they were demoralised with. And so maybe there would be space somewhere for, like, I like to play drums, so like a drummer or something. So I like the sort of thrash metal, which is why the book's called Refuse to Be Denied. So I do really enjoy playing drums. On a more sophisticated level, I probably would like to be something to do with properties, like a property developer or something. Which sounds a bit boring, but I'm always at home watching Grand Designs, Homes Under the Hammer. Kirsty Allsop is my favourite TV presenter, for those who know her. Escape to the Country, a cup of tea and I'm flying. So something along those property lines, really. The question was like, what's it like in cryotherapy? Cold. Yeah, it's cold. Next question. It's shocking. The first one we went to was very claustrophobic, so it was maybe like half the size of, say, one of these book sort of aisles here, and there's probably about 5 of you cramped in there, and there's like one spotlight, so the player will just put his hand on a spotlight, and the spotlight goes pitch black sort of thing. So if you're claustrophobic, it's quite bad. So you walk into one sort of mini fridge, which is minus 170, just to sort of climatise your body, otherwise it'd be too much of a shock. So you're all in there, then they close this big industrial door behind you. You walk through a second big industrial door, turn into the pitch black, sort of like dry ice, I can only explain it. You can see maybe a foot in front of your face. And that's then minus 140. And you just basically walk around there, boys are trying to sing, trying to dance, trying to play games, take their minds off it. But then you walk straight out and then you warm up straight away, and it's actually okay then. But for me, I don't actually mind the cryotherapy too much. I tend to pick players to go in with, like Martin Williams, maybe someone like more the older players, really a bit more sensible, because they sort of stay in there quite quiet and they don't get you quite bad. If you go in with like Bradley Davis or George North, Dan Lydia, they're trying to pull your nipples and pull your trousers have a bit of a laugh in there. So I didn't want to go in with those boys. They'd be screaming and making you panic sort of thing. So me and Martin normally were the ones, and there's a little window probably about a foot by 1 foot, and the players took a picture from the outside which looked hilarious, but it was me and him, just both of our faces like desperately perked up against the window, and the guys there with the stopwatch, we can see exactly how long we got left, so we found it horrible. So me and him probably got the most stick for being in there. But it's after the Six Nations, we went there before last year's Six Nations, and we thought it was going to be the last time we went there because they're trying to install them in the Vale where we train. So I was going on the plane, and me and George North were giving our middle finger to Poland, never going to go back there again, and they dropped the bomb on us last week. We were going back, so we were devastated. So it's very good, beneficial for training, definitely for that. I think it gives us a mental and physical edge. And like a lot of Welsh people are sort of very anti-English, like Scottish people are anti-English, but my dad was born in London and he counts himself as fully English. He actually had a conversation with me when I was 15, at the time when England were doing quite well. And he said to me, Sam, if you want, you can play for England. You're much more likely to win a World Cup. Which nobody knows that, so I can't leave it. The question was, do rugby players look at themselves as role models? I think yes and no. Some of them do. The sensible ones realise it. And there are some who need to be reminded a lot by the coaches, i.e. Gavin Ensign, Mike Phillips, Andy Powell. Driving buggies down the M4 isn't good etiquette. Definitely Andy Powell is the funniest player I've come across. And the surprising thing with the golf buggy incident is it didn't even surprise me. Everybody sort of from the outside thought, what's Andy Powell doing driving a buggy? But like, I'm surprised he hasn't been caught doing some ridiculous things before. He was, that night he was swinging off a chandelier with his top off in the club. He gets up to all sorts of things, and luckily he lives in Brecon where not many people are from, and he gets up to no good up there apparently, but nobody knows about it.